Here we are back at SHOT Show 2024. We're at the Venetian Hotel. This is, I think this is number 8 in terms of the podcast that we've done this week. And I am sitting down with Buck Pearson. And you guys might know Buck from the Staccato company. Buck, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm super stoked and interested to dig into this because I don't have any intel on you. I like zero.
Perfect.
So this is going to be very organic and like a find out session. But when my friends say, "Hey, you should reach out to this guy and have him on," I always take that very seriously, and so I'm excited to get into it because those dudes are good dudes, and they usually hang out with other good dudes.
Yeah, there's a network of like really solid guys in this industry, and however long it takes, by one degree of separation, we all end up meeting each other and become buddies over time. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is exactly what I've experienced, which is my gut told me. So in the beginning, when I started this, it was all fitness, health and wellness. It was in an effort to build brand awareness for my gym, right?
Okay.
And the fitness products that we had to take online when COVID happened and they shut my gym down in Santa Clara County in California. And also some events happened that year where with the George Floyd stuff, things got weird in the streets and it started getting weird in our streets. And then one day after kind of that incident happened, I think it was a Saturday, everybody was down. I say everybody, that's a blanket statement. A lot of people down in front of City Hall. That was 2 miles east of my gym and my business. So I put food on the table. I lived 2 blocks from there. And basically, the PD handled things decisively, but that meant people were getting pushed out and flushed out.
Sure.
And they were coming right towards my business. So I packed up, went down to the gym to try to protect it. And I was successful, but by basically just having a presence. But I realized at that point, like, I'm woefully underprepared for this.
Sure.
I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I started kind of getting into the fringes of who's teaching firearms instruction? Who is this? What is this industry about? And I quickly found it was a little weird out there.
It's putting it mildly.
Yeah. And but very much like fitness, so actually very familiar.
Yeah.
And but I was looking for smart conversations.
Sure.
And searching for that then led to, a bit more training, making good decisions about who I went to go see, to train, built some incredible relationships. And that's how this happened. I mean, Joe Dawson was the one that connected us together.
Yep.
Joe's a close friend. And again, just the right kinds of people wind up sitting in that chair. And it's all about other good people putting them there. So thanks for coming in, man.
No, I'm glad. This is my first video podcast. I'm glad it's a friend of a friend.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you might not trust me yet, but you can trust Joe like I trust Joe.
Sure.
This is going to be a good time. So again, I know very little about you, but I do know a bit about Staccato, the history of the company, kind of some things that have happened. And when I jumped into this thing, again, the training aspect and firearms training, and then looking for equipment, looking for firearms and things like that. Staccato was in 2020 was like everybody wanted a Staccato.
Yeah.
And, it was a new platform, or it was basically nobody had ever seen anything like it kind of deal. And I was very fresh to it. So when I looked at it, it looks fancy. That looks like something that's beyond me. And so I had friends that were getting them and, I was playing with them, but I hadn't trained enough to really understand.
Yeah.
And then over the years, I got my hands on a couple of them, and then I got it, right? Why everybody was so excited about it. And here at SHOT Show, we were just talking about this on the way up. Your booth is slammed.
Yes. The employees can't even get in. We're so crowded out, which is a great problem to have.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's about as deep as I've gotten and kind of who you are. Whatever. We had a couple minutes last night just to kind of connect, but here's what I tell people. I just want to find out about you and kind of how you got here. You get to start and stop wherever you want. But
Awesome.
You just have to be patient with me because I'll probably time you out to get some clarification on stuff and maybe take a little tangent, a little side trip to understand things better, and we'll come back.
Sure. I'll just go really high level, and then you can pull me down whatever street you want.
Ready, set, go.
Cool. So born and raised in Kansas. Grew up in a family of veterans who were also firearms enthusiasts. So I grew up shooting. I think I started shooting rimfire rifles when I was like 4 or 5 years old. Mm-hmm. Moved on to rimfire pistols, and then small bore shotguns, and then eventually on to a 1911. It was my dad's favorite platform. So he was very much in that, this is mid 80s, that era of, 45 is God's caliber, everything else is a Euro pellet. So I went from rimfire to 45.
Yep.
I always loved the 1911, just the history of it. It's like the American iconic handgun. So I was always drawn to that. Grew up in South Kansas, moved to Kansas City while I was in high school. Dad took a new job, moved up. Culture shock. I lived in North Kansas City. I was there for about 3.5 years, and then I decided I was going to join the military.
Talk about the culture shock. I'm not familiar with the area.
So I grew up in a very small town in South Kansas. I want to say when I was in the 80s, it was probably maybe 2,500, 3,000 people, give or take. Don't know what it is today. I haven't been there in, 30 years probably.
Okay.
When I moved to Kansas City, that was like the first time I'd ever lived in a city. I mean, Kansas City was large. We were on the Missouri side in North Kansas City. So like my high school was almost as big as the town that I had grown up in. So that was the culture shock for me.
Gotcha.
It's kind of an odd thing, that kind of distinction of going small farm town to big city high school. It took me a little bit to kind of really get to know myself in that age.
I think we're all trying to do that at that age too, right?
I'm 44 now. I'm still trying to figure out who I am. So perfect. But because of my upbringing, my family mostly being veterans, all patriotic, I always had a desire to serve.
Yep.
Never thought I would make a career of serving, but I wanted to do at least 4 years. I had no aspirations for any kind of technical skill. I just knew I didn't want to be in school anymore. I was kind of sick of book work. And I wanted to go into the infantry. Something I understood. So I talked to an Army recruiter, and then I later talked to a Marine Corps recruiter, and one was dramatically more impressive than the other, and I ended up in the Marine Corps.
They do a good job at that recruiting stuff.
They do. They know how to give you the hard sell to make you feel like you're inferior. So you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to double down. I'm going to prove to you I'm what you're looking for. Right. You learn years later it's all a trap. Yeah, they totally hook you as soon as you walk through the door. Yeah. But I ended up in the Marine Corps, which... I'm very happy I did. I think that was probably, looking back on it with all the, the wisdom I have at this point in my life, I think that couldn't have been a better decision. And it was probably one of the best ones I've made in my life.
Interesting.
So went in the Marine Corps. I graduated high school a semester early because I couldn't wait to get out of the classroom. So I took extra...
You were motivated.
Yeah, extra classes just to have enough credits to graduate. So I graduated January 20th of 98.
Okay.
And I went, and I went straight to boot camp on the 25th of January.
This is pre 9/11 then. Yep.
Yeah, I had enough wild times in high school that I knew if I didn't just go do it,
that might not happen.
I'd always have a reason to not do it, and then I'd probably be doing nothing. So went and did it. Went in on an infantry contract and loved it. I loved the fact that I was doing it. I never thought it was going to be a career for me. And I had actually, at the end of my first enlistment, I was about 100, maybe 120 days out from going on terminal leave and getting out. And I was going to go to the Motorcycle Mechanic Institute in Florida.
Okay.
Didn't know what I wanted to do. Didn't want to go to college, but I was like, I always loved motorcycles. I'd ridden them through my teenage years. I was like, I'm just going to go be a bike mechanic.
Okay.
9/11 happened. So I did a quick reassessment of what I thought my life goals were. And I'm like, screw this. Went and talked to my career planner and put in a re-enlistment package.
Time out for just a sec. So what's happening with you in the Marine Corps up until that point? Like, where are you? Were there deployments?
Yeah, so I was stationed in Hawaii
at
the time, from the end of my first enlistment. So I was in 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, just regular infantry battalion.
Marine Corps Base Hawaii.
Yep, Kaneohe Bay. We had done some UDP deployments, which is you go to unit deployment program. Your whole infantry battalion goes to Okinawa.
Oh yes, I've heard of this.
For 7 months, and you basically you go to a different country every 4 to 6 weeks.
You do the tour.
Yeah, you train. You spend a bunch of time in the field, and then you spend a bunch of time partying, whatever city's there in that country. And then after 7 months of that, you fly back home and you start that whole cycle over again.
Okay.
So nothing real world going on, not for conventional units anyway. I came in a little after kind of Kosovo was over and before anything else was really going on.
Yep, it was a little lull.
Yeah, I just wasn't doing anything, which was fine. It was a good growing experience in that 4 years, maturing phase. Sure. So
then 9/11 happens.
9/11 happens. As you probably remember, the whole country was just polarized by that event, and it was probably the most unified our country's been in my lifetime.
I'm happy that I experienced that.
Yeah.
Because it gives me some perspective on and hope that we could come back, be back there. We're certainly not there now. But I'm fearful that it has to be another event like that in order to do it. Maybe that's what needs to happen. I don't know, but I am happy that I experienced that time period, so I could talk about it and remember it. Obviously, awful events, but man, neighbors were talking to one another. There was a little bit more of a sense of understanding, patience with people. I mean, patriotism was through the roof.
Yeah.
You know, you start to see American flags out hanging on the front of houses again, and in the yards, and you know, all of that stuff. Yeah, it was a pretty special time in a way.
Yeah. And I, you know, for all the bad reasons that happened, I loved that side effect of it. And I'm glad that I was at an age where I remember it because it gives me a little bit of hope for where we're at now. I mean, I don't think our country's been as divided as it is today in my lifetime.
It's wild.
And it gives me hope that we can get back to that place where, you know, we're all friends again. You know, you and I can have a disagreement on a topic, talk about it, and still
that's all it is.
Hug it out at the end and go on about our life. So
you re-enlisted?
I re-enlisted thinking we've just been attacked. The whole Marine, you know, still pretty naive. I'm like 21, maybe 22 by this time. You know, the whole Marine Corps is going to be at war. The whole U.S. military is going to be at war in like the next 2 weeks.
At some point.
Yeah.
But you're figuring, oh, this is happening right now. I know the reality of that.
It's going to happen soon, and it's going to be over quick. Like, stay in one more time and you know, go be part of that. I didn't know at the time that it was going to go on for 20 plus years. I didn't know that it was going to turn into two different wars under the blanket of global war on terror. So did that, re-enlisted, stayed for another deployment. Didn't go to Afghanistan. I was not one of the infantry battalions that did. But on that next deployment, again, as a UDP to Okinawa, 2 months into the deployment, we get tapped to go do anti-piracy rotations out of Bahrain.
Gotcha.
We were basically putting small 10 to 12 man detachments for security on civilian and naval ships didn't know it at the time, but bringing over all the ammo and equipment for the invasion of Iraq.
Understood.
You start to put the pieces together. Hey, we're getting ready to invade Iraq, which is pretty wild to me. We've not even been to Afghanistan yet. And that's, you know, where we were being told we had been attacked from. And you're just seeing the massive influx of everything coming in.
I mean, it was wild. I think you said it was, but at the same time, what was your head on this at that point?
I was still at an age where, like, I paid zero attention to politics. I think that's actually easier when you're, like, young in the military.
That's the same way.
Like, ultimately, it doesn't matter if I agree or disagree. We're going to get orders, and as long as they're lawful, you have to go execute them, right? So it's almost an easy button to just be like, I don't care about the politics.
We got work to do.
Yeah. It's a job, and they're not giving us anything illegal to do. So, I mean, you
can feel good about that.
Yeah, you do your job. And ultimately at the time, based on the intelligence we had, we thought it was all, you know, I won't say part of the attack on 9/11, but it all kind of fell under the umbrella of countries that were actively trying to do things to the United States. So, you know, to a young man's mind, it made sense.
Gotcha.
And I probably gave it no more thought than that at the time.
That's honest. I appreciate that. Yeah. So we know it takes a couple of years to actually get into Iraq, which is where the Marine Corps was. I feel like it was at least a year and a half before we actually went in. Like, there was this huge, like, staging process, correct me if I'm wrong.
And this time frame is kind of late 2002 when I started this anti-piracy detachment. So we did that for about 4.5, almost 5 months. We rotated back to Okinawa, and I kid you not, like, within 2 weeks of us getting back to Okinawa, it was March of 2003, and we just watched the invasion of Iraq on the news in the barracks.
Oh, wow.
And we were like, we were just there. Why didn't we go?
Right.
You know, again, very naive to the big picture. And it was very frustrating. You're watching the whole war on the TV, very similar to seeing Desert Storm when I was like in middle school on TV for the first time.
Right.
And you're like, it's going to be over in a week, and we just missed it. Great. You know, so everybody's in Okinawa getting hammered and pissed off, and we get in fist fights with each other at the E Club. Normal 22-year-old stuff.
Marine behavior.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it was just frustrating. Came back from that deployment, went back to Hawaii, and I ended up getting orders PCSing out of Hawaii to a non-deployable training school. So I was an instructor at a schoolhouse in Virginia for 3 years. So I missed the height, like 03 to 06 of Iraq time frame, which is really when it was bad.
Yeah, real bad.
After that 3 years, go right back to Hawaii, get orders right back to a different...
Hold on, what was the schoolhouse?
It was the CQB schoolhouse. At the Marine Corps Security Force Training Company.
Gotcha.
So we were training like the guys who go stand fire watch at nuclear bases, and then fast platoons that would deploy. And in that kind of time frame, it was odd. Fast platoons were moving away from doing more of the security role that they'd always done, and they were getting attached to different combat elements and actually doing like convoy security and stuff like that for like 1st Recon Battalion and things. So they were taking a more active role than their traditional charter held. So that schoolhouse was kind of a really cool place to be there because it was really the first time.
It's kind of progressive.
It's really the only time in the Marine Corps where I was someplace where we shot almost every day.
Oh, neat.
Like the rest of the time you get like, oh, here's your 12 blanks, make it count kind of thing. That was, the Bill Clinton era of the Marine Corps. So that was my first exposure to getting to shoot a lot and a lot of handgun because really between a handgun and a carbine, like most people can get relatively proficient with a carbine with very little training. Pistol training in the military is just not something you get in the infantry even. And so that was the cause for the highest washout rate from that school. So
is that right?
The instructor cadre took pistol shooting, like that was that and fitness
important.
were the two most important things to being an instructor there. So they would bring in outside instructors that weren't in the military to run clinics and stuff.
Right.
And that was my first exposure to
professional shooters or whatever.
Exactly. Guys who would kind of learn on their own from wherever they came from, whether they were a pro shooter or, tier 1 military guy who's now retired, that, there's ways to get faster and more accurate that you're never going to learn in the military. And they kind of, they built businesses off figuring things out on their own and then coming back and giving that back to guys still doing it.
Yeah, we had a couple guys on the show that did that.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see the progression over that of 20 years too. I think back to the guy, Al Clark was the guy we always brought out.
Okay.
Al's a cool, really cool guy. He was a former Dev SEAL, but like in the 80s and 90s, he got out. He was one of the original crew that founded Blackwater, so he kind of missed everything that was happening, GWAT, but he was a very good pistol shooter, and he was coming back and running pistol clinics for us, and we all kind of wanted, one day we were like, if we just dry fire 7 days a week, we might be almost as good as Al one day kind of mentality. So he was the first guy in my career where I was like, I need to learn how to do this. I need to listen to what he's saying. Like he's figured something out that's allowed him to get to that level with duty gear. Like he's not running race pistols. He's not running a race rig. Like he's out there in a Safari Land holster and a SIG 226.
Same stuff everybody that he's training as well.
And that's where my eyes really got open to learning how to train and not just being a student in a clinic kind of thing. The Marine Corps is very good about cut and dry. You're going to shoot these drills to this time standard with this many rounds. And at the end of it, you have a pass-fail score. Okay, great. You didn't learn anything. You're really just, you're getting to a bare minimum acceptable standard. Al was the one who showed me somewhat early in my career that there's a better way to do things and that you should always be improving your baseline skill sets. And just because of that schoolhouse and the fact that pistol was like such held in high regard as far as skill level, like I knew I was never going to be the biggest, strongest guy, as you can see. I knew I was never going to be the fastest guy. So I was like, I'm going to pick this one thing. I loved shooting pistols when I was growing up. I'm going to beat everyone in this cadre at pistol shooting. That was like my internal drive. Was like, I'm going to get better at this than all my buddies that talk shit to me all the time.
And did you?
Eventually, yeah. We had some really good shooters in that cadre.
What was the journey like? Were you guys competing?
Not really.
Just within the group?
At that time frame during Iraq and Afghanistan, we were running courses that were graduating on a Friday and picking up on a Monday. So we got very little time to go compete. The one competition we did do was U.S. Department of Energy used to hold an annual competition for tactical teams, and it was kind of a by invite only. And that training schoolhouse cadre had been going since sometime in the 90s, so they just always had a recurring invite. We would always send guys to that because it was only a 4 or 5 day competition, and it was like international competition. And it was a mix of individual and team team comp. So there's like a lot of bragging rights to it. We know we're going to compete against a bunch of guys with like that actually have optics on their rifles, which the Marine Corps didn't have yet, and better pistols than, Beretta 92s, which we were running Beretta 92s that were probably made when I was in grade school.
Yeah.
So there was that very stubborn mentality of we're going to go there and we're going to beat all these guys every time. Now, we didn't beat everyone all the time, but we did very well. Okay. And it was just one of those things. It led to that drive to get better and better and better at those kind of base hard skills of marksmanship.
Got it. So you don't stay there forever.
No, you get to stay everywhere in the Marine Corps. You stay for 3 years. They move you every 3 years. So get done with that. I was kind of really debating. So in that same time frame, I also had my first child. She was 1 year old at the time, and I'm like, do I stay in?
It's a lot, yeah.
And Al had actually asked me if I want to come work for him at his training company and kind of start getting into the the consumer side of being a pistol carbine instructor. And I thought really hard about it, and ultimately seeing a bunch of my friends that had stayed in deploying units in that time frame, and some of them getting mangled, some of them getting killed. I kind of just felt driven. I'm like, it didn't feel like the right time for me to punch. So I stayed in. I re-enlisted. Okay. I remember I called my monitor and I was like, hey, my wife is from Hawaii. If you can just get me orders back to Hawaii, she won't care if I re-enlist. I don't care if I'm deploying a week after I get there. And he's like, hey, yeah, no problem. Got me orders to 3-3, and I went right back to Kaneohe Bay.
Wow.
At that time, when I got there, 3-3 was actually deployed in Haditha, Iraq. So when I got there, there was nobody there. It was like there remained behind us like 8 guys and then some wounded guys that had rotated back. So that's the first time it was very, very real for me that, hey, it's not just, your buddy died. It's now you're seeing the after effects of guys who got really messed up and lived. That's when the realization set in, and it became, for me, I think, mentally, that was my transformative time where I started to really take being in the military serious.
How do you mean?
Well, my first enlistment, I might as well have been a frat boy. Right. It was a 4-year party. Okay. 9/11 made it real, but it made it real in the last 4 months of my first enlistment. That deployment, it was like, yes, it was a good deployment to like, it's real, but nothing happened. Like, I wasn't on a ship that got ambushed by 40 pirates. I mean, you're out there as a deterrent, not as something offensive. I come back from that. I go to this training schoolhouse and I get really exposed to shooting and tactics, but you're in a schoolhouse. You're not doing it for real.
Right.
So it was great for my personal training and my personal skill sets, but it wasn't like I had gone and done anything yet.
In terms of the application of it somewhere else.
Yeah. And in my mind, I'm still, I think at that point I was like maybe 25, 26 years old. Like, I'm still very confident, but I'm still very mentally immature.
Yep. Not fully wired yet.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, fuck this. I'm going to stay in. I'm going to go back. I'm going to deploy. It's going to be awesome. We're going to go stack bodies somewhere, right? Very young, naive thought to what was really happening. So you
come back and you see these guys.
I check into the fleet and you see guys that are really fucked up for real. And you're like, hey, this isn't a game. It's not a video game.
You sure you want to go?
Yeah, it's not a movie. But in my mind, I was called very strong. I was like, this is where you need to be, but you need to, put your thinking cap on and start thinking about this for real. It's a profession. It's not a one-time thing.
Got it.
So I think at that point is when I started to really take being an infantryman on a professional level serious.
Interesting. And what did that mean in terms of was it just the mindset, or were the things you were doing with your training and your leadership and, communication? Talk about that.
I think the biggest part is the leadership, right? It's very easy to take care of yourself. It's very hard for you to take care of everyone you're in charge of. And like it or not, the military is a machine. It's a conveyor belt. You stay in long enough. Doesn't matter what your skill level is. You're going to get promoted. You're going to be in charge of people.
That's the way it works.
Yeah. So I went from being like a squad leader before I went to the CQB schoolhouse and being in charge of, 10 guys in non-wartime activities. To being at the schoolhouse where I'm really just in charge of myself, because it's a cadre of like 10, 12 instructors that are all, second and third enlistment guys. They take care of themselves. To going right back to the fleet, and now I'm a platoon sergeant, and I've got 30 to 40 guys. And
that's a lot.
20 of those guys just came back from a really nasty Iraq deployment. There was 11 KIAs in the battalion and like 170 something wounded, out of 900 guys.
Where were they?
Haditha, the Haditha triad. So each company was in a different location. I don't remember where all of the individual companies were. The company that I went to had just come from Haditha.
Got it.
So it's how do you set yourself apart as a leader to guys who know you've never done anything?
That's a rough spot, man.
And you're coming from a schoolhouse, so they know the hottest part of Iraq, at least for the Marine Corps, was that 03 to 06 time frame.
Mm-hmm. And you missed it.
I just missed all of it. Missed all of it to go, play around with pistols in a live fire house for a few years.
Okay, I mean, that's a little bit of...
But that's the mentality, right?
I totally get it.
Yeah. So you come back to that, and there's a process where you have to earn your place. Like, yes, I was their leader by default, by rank and billet, but I had to earn it. I had to earn their respect.
Were you like upfront about that? Or, how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's always being in the front. Not literally, but like if you're asking them to do something, you're doing it with them. Mm-hmm. If you're asking them to maintain a fitness level that's above the bare minimum standard, you're doing that with them. You're leading them through that. Mm-hmm. The Marine Corps is really big on producing people who just like to scream a lot and not really have anything to fucking say. Just like to hear themselves yell at people. It's like
a lot of talk, a lot of volume.
Yeah, you'll respect my authority. I had a very different perspective on leadership. And so on one end, I felt like I did a very good job of always earning the trust of whoever I was in charge of. Sometimes to a fault that people above me thought I was being too nice to the people underneath me.
Okay.
And I had this platoon sergeant at one point in my career who had said something along the lines of, you'll know you're being a good leader when the guys underneath you follow you because they want to, not because they have to. And that kind of stuck with me. And I always maintained that mentality for the rest of my career, all the way up until the day I got out. And that's something I still do today. Mm-hmm. Outside of the military for the last 11 years, I've always treated everyone who works with me with that same statement on my mind.
Mm-hmm. So do you ever get shipped over there?
I do. Yeah. So in that battalion, they came back and we did a rapid turnaround. So we did a very quick workup. And I'm trying to remember, I want to say it was about 6 months. It was supposed to be like a 12-month turnaround. We ended up deploying about 6 months later.
That's fast.
And we went right to Camp Fallujah, and the companies got split up from there. But at that point, we had got there like right as kind of the major hostilities ended, and a lot of the people we had been fighting had decided to work with us.
Okay.
So it was a very odd time of we're ripping out with a company there that's been getting in gunfights daily.
And now they're trying to be friends.
For the last 5.5 months. And now a month before RIP, we think we should work together. And we didn't know if it was a trap or not, right? But of course, higher level, probably being pushed from politicians, is you're going to train them to be successful so we can pull out.
It's the reality of that.
Yeah.
What's the reality of that?
We've seen it now. Yep. Yeah, the reality is that we didn't change a thing. Now we removed Saddam Hussein, but we removed Saddam Hussein in 2003. Mm-hmm. This is now 2007, 2008. This deployment overlaps that time frame. So you could argue, I could make the argument that I think what we did removing Saddam Hussein was the right call. That guy was a maniac.
Yep.
So were his two sons. And in this industry, I've actually become friends with a couple of the guys who were on that mission. And it's really cool. I'm like, I can't believe you were one of the guys who's there.
Yeah.
But like what we were doing after that, we were playing whack-a-mole for a few years.
Yeah, whack-a-mole.
And then we get to the phase where I'm finally there, so we're now 6 years beyond 9/11. I'm finally over there, and we're training people that in all reality, we probably should have been killing.
It's crazy.
In the grand scheme of things. Like I remember hearing stories from some of the guys we were training when they were talking about IEDs they had been putting on, route mobile for the battalion that was just there before us. And I'm like,
wild.
That's when I really started to become jaded with the political side of U.S. involvement in major wars.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, like going through the whole mindset change and trying to be a professional, and what does that do to a soldier who's trying to do all the right things?
Yeah,
and for all the right reasons.
It makes you question everything about, who are these people making these decisions for us and what's their why? We talked about, we're fighting a counterinsurgency for the better part of a decade. And it's like, what does that look like? What's the end goal? And just about any task you have in the military, there's a desired end state.
Yep.
There's a minimum end state and an exceptional end state, right? But there's never we'll figure it out on the fly kind of end state.
That's what this whole thing was.
We had no set defined what is our objective. So what are we really doing? And when you're at the point at a maturity level, you start to think about things that way. You start to get jaded about the whole. I don't know even the right word for it because it's a mix of, senior military leadership, politicians, public opinion, like all of that kind of rolled into one.
It's complex.
Whatever that is, right? You start to become jaded about the whole thing.
I get that.
Yeah. And
I'm jaded about it and I wasn't even there.
Yeah.
Just ridiculousness.
Sure.
When you look back on it, and you already mentioned all the people that died or have had their lives completely turned upside down.
Died, wounded, and and you think about the after effects too, all the guys who die after their back, self-inflicted.
I just had that conversation downstairs last night. I met a guy, and he said, I really want to introduce you to my boss. I have, through my journey on the podcast, this was a topic, veteran and first responder suicide, and mental and emotional health. It came up, and through a group of guys called the Overwatch Collective. They're out in California.
Okay.
And, that was a nonprofit that they started because they were just tired of seeing their buddies die by suicide, And so as I started to dig into it, I didn't understand all of the things. And I've never personally dealt with that. Like, I've never had anybody close to me die by suicide. So we kind of started to dig into a little bit more, and I discovered how so underfunded, recognized, just resourced that whole thing is. So anyway, last night I met up with these guys, and this guy, has had 17 surgeries, below the knee amputation, and he's same thing, and I think he's testified in front of Congress and basically putting together a facility to be able to swoop guys up when they're in their lowest point, bring them out, and just be fully immersive with the mental and emotional health. These guys are just in psychiatric crisis, and the addiction that can sometimes come along with that for all sorts of reasons, and then kind of putting them back together with a plan to continue on their road. That's something that really hit me hard in the last 2 years. And I put a lot of effort into trying to spread the word about that, fundraising for folks and whatever. So that's how it hit me. And I didn't even know these guys. I don't even know them at all. So that's a topic that comes up semi-frequently, and all I can do is try and understand it. But being jaded, I feel like that's putting it lightly.
Yeah.
I'd be angry, man.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you should be angry.
No.
I know that's how I would probably be handling it and dealing with it.
Honestly, I think that reinforces voting. Like, you need to get out and vote. Like, do your due diligence on the people you're electing, not just at the presidential level, but like your local county sheriff. Like, we elect members of our school board. How many people actually pay attention to who's running to be on the school board?
Right. We've seen that that's important now.
Elections have consequences at every level. And I think the American people as a whole need to get far more involved with the screening and vetting of the people we're putting in these decision-making roles from the top all the way down to the bottom.
That's wild.
But that could be a whole nother.
That's a whole other
podcast. Yeah. You don't want me on here for political debates. There's way smarter people.
I usually don't do that on here anyway. So we stay away from the politics and the religion most of the time. Yeah. But okay, so how long are you over there for?
I was over there for 7 months. Well, 6.5 months. So I left 2 weeks early so that I could immediately come back and go to a 12-week-long infantry school in Camp Pendleton.
Oh, God.
So while I was on this deployment, my wife gave birth to our second daughter.
Okay.
Missed birth by about 30 days. Come home, she's 5.5 months old. Hang out with my wife and my 2 daughters for about 7 days, and then I go to Camp Pendleton for almost 3 months.
Wow.
California, and I'm there for an infantry school. Come back from that school. I'm back for a week. Then I'm in the field for a week, and then I come out of the field early to go to Virginia for another school for 3 weeks. And then I come back from that, and I'm in a full deployment workup. So in that time frame from me deploying to Iraq in 2007 to getting ready for this next deployment, I had spent, my wife counted at one point, I'll probably mess it up, but I had spent like 14 days at home.
Wow.
And like in an almost a year period. And that's when it was starting to wear me down a little bit, because it wasn't so much you're working to get back over there at this point. It's like we were just over there and we know we're not doing anything. And we're taking away all this time and putting all this effort into doing all these weird things that are not an infantryman's job, to go over there and basically be policemen. And I was very... At the time, that is probably the lowest point I was at in my entire military career, as far as my personal mental health. Just being there in the middle of that, during that transitional phase, I was just angry at everything.
I mean, I think that's what I was getting at. Like, because these things have, you mentioned, like voting has consequences. There's a lot of liability at this point in your life. You know, like as you're going through it, there's a lot to think about there. And it all weighs heavy versus when you were 25, you know, or 22 or whatever, going back to being a kid, and immature. So it's tough to be a leader like that.
It's like, how do you hold that in so that your guys don't see that, and then immediately think the same way as you by default, and therefore you now have a non-functioning, platoon. So it was a very interesting time. I'm kind of keeping all that bottled up inside. I'm venting to my wife when I see her. But I was very upset by all that. And at this point, I was contemplating getting out. Again, I was coming towards the end of enlistment. I'm like, fuck this. Not worth it. Not worth the toll on the family. We're not even doing anything anymore. Meanwhile, it's 2008. I still haven't been to Afghanistan. 7 years past 9/11 at this point. But there was something in me. I was like, don't be a quitter. There's more things coming. You just need to work through it. It was kind of like my mental path I went on. I mean, there's obviously a lot more to it than that, and there was ups and downs. But ultimately, the decision I made the decision to re-enlist again. I was like, I hadn't checked every box for what I wanted to accomplish post 9/11. So re-enlisted, doing this deployment workup. Deployment ends up getting bumped or something like that and changed, and it wasn't even a combat deployment anymore. And at the same time, I get orders to PCS to move again. It'd been 3 years now, so I'm leaving now. And I got orders to the Mountain Warfare Center in Northern California.
Eastern California.
It's about an hour south of Lake Tahoe.
It's up there near Yosemite.
I live in that area now.
Re-enlistment or whatever.
So... go up there. I had never been there for any training package in my career, so I had no idea what to expect. Check in the middle of the wintertime. This is now February 2009.
It's cold.
Yeah, there was a blizzard happening.
It's not Hawaii.
Yeah, it's not Hawaii. But I ended up thoroughly loving that job. Just being in the mountains, hiking, skiing, lead climbing, doing tactical stuff, tactical movements with battalions and companies in a mountainous terrain. It was all geared towards prepping for Afghanistan again. So in that time frame, the Marine Corps kind of in Iraq, the Hyderabad left, they had actually left Afghanistan, and it was mostly just the Army over there. And now we're getting back into the time frame where the Marine Corps is starting to send guys back to Afghanistan. Northern Helmand was a hotbed again, 2009, 2010. The Marine Corps is making a big push to start sending guys over there. In the same time frame, I'm going to the Mountain Warfare Center, where the Marine Corps is pushing all these infantry battalions to come and get trained before they go to Afghanistan. So it was kind of perfect timing. I get there, I get out of the mental, darkness about the big Marine Corps.
I got to get these guys ready to go.
And it's like, okay, I've got my focus back. We have a clear objective here. We're training the guys going to Afghanistan. Let's do this as best as I can. In that time frame, loved it the whole time I was there. I end up getting orders to 1-1 down to Pendleton, to a battalion that had just come through a training package there the previous year and was getting ready to go on deployment like 90 days after my check-in straight to Afghanistan. So I check in, and I immediately get put in charge of the sniper platoon. I'm not a sniper. I'm not a school-trained sniper. I've never been a sniper in my career. But I get put in the sniper platoon. The Marine Corps loves to do that. They're like, oh, you're a mortarman? Well, you're a rifle platoon sergeant now. You need to get well-rounded. And it's like, okay, good intentions, but always usually a poorer result. But anyway, I had gotten put in there because they wanted to plus up this sniper platoon and use them in a more traditional kind of infantry platoon role. So it made sense to the battalion gunner and the battalion commander as well to use me in that role. And it ended up being the coolest thing I ever did in my career.
Cool.
So go over to Helmand for 7 months. have this sniper platoon, and I had 5 8-man teams, so a 42-man sniper platoon, which is massive. Marine Corps sniper platoons usually about 16 to 18 guys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so huge. One of my teams went down south with another company too, went with our lieutenant with the battalion forward. And then I had 2 teams, and we attached to our helo company, and we were doing all kinds of healer interdiction stuff for, 5 months of that deployment. So we stayed super busy. It was more traditional infantry stuff, but we were back in the place that in my mind, I was like immediately following 9/11. I was like, that's where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, this is, a year after they'd gotten bin Laden, but things had still kind of picked up. So it still made sense for me for what we were doing. It felt like we were fighting a real enemy over there.
Yep.
There was a clear objective to everything we were doing on a micro level on that deployment. And while I was over there, I was also kind of in that same time frame. I'm an E7 at this point. I'm a gunny. I knew that as soon as I get promoted, like when I come back from that deployment, I'm going to be a company gunny. So I'm no longer going to be a platoon sergeant anymore. And then from there, I'll be an E8. So I either have to be an ops chief or I have to become a first sergeant, which I was never going to do.
Okay.
None of those really sounded appealing to me. And I started to think, I was like, well, you've checked every box. Maybe you should just get out now. I also have 3 kids at this point in time. So I've got 3 kids. I haven't been home in years, really. I was like, I could just get out now and be happy. And I've been in about 15 years at this point. The Temporary Early Retirement Authority got approved by Congress, which was something they did during the first Clinton drawdown post-Desert Storm, for the military to use for the big drawdown that was coming in 2013 because we were done with GWAD, which was bullshit too. So I applied for it, and it came back approved. Like within 3 days. It's probably the fastest I saw the Marine Corps move my whole career.
Wow.
MAR admin from Afghanistan to Quantico, back to Afghanistan, approved in like 3 days. So finished the deployment, came back home, and then I retired 7-8 months after I got back from that deployment.
And when was that?
July 2013, I retired.
Then what?
That's a good question. Found out my wife was pregnant with twins. So we were about to have 5 kids. Found this out 4 days before I was retiring.
That's wild.
Post-deployment accident was not planned. I had planned on using my GI Bill to go to college and become a nurse. And so I was like, that was my plan. And then my wife's like, we're having twins. And I was like, well, I can't support 5 kids off a GI Bill, monthly BAH stipend. I'm going to have to find a job. So I had a friend who had gotten out and gone to work for Al Clark's old company way back in the day, and he kind of got me an interview out there to do anti-piracy stuff as a civilian contractor. So I go out there, I do some like machine gun armors classes with him, and then I go through their like maritime security team leaders course. Graduate at the very top of that, so I was guaranteed a job slot. It was like 25 guys competing for like 4 open jobs or something like that. So I'm one of the 4. And then, no kidding, I fly back home, and a week later, we find out they lost all their contracts with the shipping agencies. Had been renegotiated. So I had no job. I got paid for the time I was out there, but I'm like, all right, back to square one. And my buddy at that company had introduced me to the owner's son of U.S. Ordnance, which is a machine gun manufacturer in Reno. So I went and interviewed there, and I ended up going to work at U.S. Ordnance for like 3 years.
Okay.
From 2013 to 2016.
What are you doing for them?
I started as like the assembly manager, so it's just supervising the guys building the guns, and then that includes test fire and everything else. And then I kind of had a hybrid role with a lot of the foreign militaries would send people there, so I'd help with their training on the guns, things like that. And then towards the tail end, I was getting more into like a sales support function for the sales guys there. They liked using some of the military guys who worked there, because then it's a military guy talking to another military guy. It helped them out. I did a couple of small sales trips, and then came back, and I was like, I really kind of like this sales thing. It's cool. I get to go out in the field, meet the dudes where they're at. But it just wasn't in the cards for me to become a sales guy there. It's a family-owned business, so there's kids that are going to step up and take those roles in that company, which I totally get. So I stepped away from that after 3 years, and I went back into private security stuff for a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
Just to make money while I kind of figured out what I wanted to do with life.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot of transitions, man.
It is. It was rough. And in that same time frame, my wife had all kinds of complications with the twins as well. We ended up losing one of the twins shortly before they could have, emergency surgery saved both. which that was extremely hard on my family and myself.
I've been there.
And it's just, you add that on to the uncertainty of you just got out because you wanted to be there for your family, but you're not even employed. And, it's a lot of stress. And that was really hard, that whole period of time, that 2013 to 2016 time. Well, really 2018 was rough for my whole family.
Right.
So,
trying to find some direction and some answers. Yeah, I have a similar story. So it's hard to know.
Yeah.
Especially when, but I have to be honest, like I'm just listening to your story. It's kind of always gone in these like 3 to 5 year increments.
Yeah. It really has. It's like everything's an enlistment.
Yeah.
It's like your brain mentally prepares your life. Everything's an enlistment. So, okay, what am I doing this 4 years? What am I doing the next 4 years?
Which is interesting because I think a lot of people trying to have the ultimate plan, right? Like, where am I going to be in 20 years? And the reality of it is it still goes in 3 to 4 or 5 year increments. For me, it's like 3 to 6 months at a time sometimes. Like, let's just get through the next 3 months. We'll reevaluate and see what the 3 months after that do or whatever. Sometimes it's really tough. And when you have all that kind of stuff going on, it's not realistic to think you're going to know.
Yeah.
So, but you're in you're in California, Reno area, right?
I live like the Nevada side, about an hour south of Reno.
Okay, gotcha.
Gardnerville area. So by default, that's where all the mountain warfare instructors lived. So we all end up there. Yeah. And then after I retired out of Pendleton, we moved back there. My wife actually loved it, even though she's from Hawaii. She's like, well, Tahoe has a beach, so I'm good. And it's our home. We've lived there since 2009 when I first got stationed there.
It's gorgeous over there. Right. I really like it over there. Tahoe's beautiful if you go up the hill and you want to hang out. But, there's been so much growth down and around there. It used to be old and kind of rough.
Yep.
And now it's not that at all if you go through there.
Lots of Bay Area people have moved there, ever since Tesla opened the first Gigafactory there. Then it was like 1,500 jobs from Google. And then it's all these other small tech companies. And it's really just San Francisco has migrated to either the greater Reno area or Boise in the last 10 years. Yep. So it's been an interesting shift.
Yeah.
But like the county we're in is great. Sheriff is awesome. The people, it's still a community.
Yeah.
There's a ton of retired guys there too. It's like a mountain warfare instructors retirement community. There's so many of us there for multiple generations. It's just a really cool town.
That is cool.
It's a great place to raise your kids too. So
where does Staccato come into this?
So in the 2 years of kind of transitioning and finding my way, I'm doing this security gig, private thing up in Lake Tahoe, and I meet Nate Horvat. He was on a school board or board of directors for a private school that his children attended, and I met him doing some stuff for work there. One of my friends from the Marine Corps also worked as the security person at that private school, and we ended up taking Nate and a bunch of his friends out shooting. And most of his friends were also prior veterans, one enlistment kind of guys in the Desert Storm era, kind of like the 88 to 92 time frame. Okay. So they had been in the military, they'd served, they like firearms. But they realized, it's been a long time, we're a little rusty, let's, get some training. Okay. So me and my buddy from the Marine Corps were giving Nate and a few of his friends just private training stuff on the range.
Cool.
Ended up becoming friends with them. It's funny looking back on it. I didn't know that Nate was involved with STI at the time at all, but he always showed up with STI pistols. And kind of at the end of 2017, he had approached me. He was stepping down from the board of directors that owned STI, and he's stepping in as the CEO. And he approached me and he's like, hey, I'm going to need help. There's a lot going on with STI at the time. I'd like you to come work for me and kind of help me out with, it was a starting job. It was like a basic sales job and then a little bit of like product R&D type stuff, like shoot the guns and tell us, what you think about them and what would you change kind of thing. But it was primarily a sales function.
Okay.
And I'd had very little sales experience other than U.S. Ord, and that was international military stuff. So I was like,
totally different type of thing.
I was like, I love that. This will probably be great. I like pistols way more than I like machine guns for the most part. So I was like, I thought about it for like a day. And then I told him, I was like, sure, I'll give it a shot. And my very first day at work was actually technically my final interview, but it was at SHOT Show in 2018.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he was all good with hiring me, but like as a formality, he flew me down here for a day to work the booth and meet everyone else in the company.
Wow. That's cool. That's a cool transition.
And he's still our CEO today. And I was his first hire as the CEO, and I'm still here. And we've had a phenomenal working relationship over the last 6 years.
So talk about the job now.
Yeah, so I'm currently the Chief Business Development Officer. So it's kind of a long stretch of constant, self-improvement and then helping what I could within Staccato. So I started, like I said, as kind of an entry-level sales manager.
Okay.
And I was managing dealer accounts west of the Mississippi, but not Texas.
That's a lot.
So there's one lady who had all of Texas, and then there was another lady we hired who had every dealer east of the Mississippi. So it was a ton of work. And in that time frame, I also was trying to get some LE stuff going.
Yep.
STI had no LE connections at all. When I started, there was one department in Florida that was running STI 1911s and 45 that they had bought like 5 or 10 years before, our time there, but none running a 2011. Mm-hmm. And it was historically because 2011s were considered super finicky at best, which I learned a lot of this on the job after the fact. But, the magazines are bad. You got to tune them to the gun. And I remember the first time I heard tune a magazine, I was like, what the hell does that mean? Mm-hmm. I was like, I've never done anything except load my magazines. Like, I don't understand what tuning is. And, so some of the gunsmiths are explaining this to me. And I was like, wow.
It's a lot here.
It sounds like this is an old hot rod and it's like really cool. But every time I take it out, it'll go fast until it breaks something.
You have to make an adjustment.
Something breaks every time I drive it.
Yeah, that's not what you want.
Not what we want. So that's when we really started the driving force. It's like, let's improve the quality of this thing and then start looking at what we can do to make it incrementally better.
Okay.
And that really started at the top down with Nate's leadership. That was his primary goal coming into just stepping down to be the CEO. And then from my perspective as a low-level sales guy, knowing I want to get into the LE market, it's like, I'm not going to go show that to anyone. Like that, I wouldn't carry that. Mm-hmm. Like, we need to fix this and we need to make them reliable. Mm-hmm. And that really started... That's where it all started, is kind of that early 2018 timeframe.
And so how long does it take you to make it better, a better product?
Every day. Like, that's one of our company mottos is always forward. Mm-hmm. We stole that actually, I think, from Apple. That was like one of their company pillars is always forward, right? You'll always improve. Sometimes it'll be small incremental improvements, but at least it's forward movement. Sometimes it might be a big improvement. So we really started looking at it at a fine level. It's like, well, what's really messed up with the 2011? Because every time people shoot it, they love it. They're like, nothing shoots like that. Well, feeding and extracting are the two biggest problems. So we start looking at the magazine. The magazine's what's feeding the gun. We launched that Gen 2 magazine to try and improve as much of the legacy 2011 magazines as we could. We learned more about that throughout a couple of years of Gen 2 use, and we moved to the Gen 3 mag, playing with geometry, things like that. And we've made that magazine about as reliable as it can get.
Gotcha.
That same kind of time frame, we started an R&D cycle on kind of in the background of like, okay, moving away from a 2011 magazine and moving away from the internal extractor, which is, the extraction. The second problem with the 2011 is how do we improve those?
Right.
And, so we started playing around with a lot of stuff in like 2020.
Yeah.
We were like I was playing with a prototype that was like running on a SIG P320 mag just to see what would happen, little things like that. And we ultimately got to the point where we were pulling things from other companies' magazines that we liked and looking at that and be like, what actually works, what's not necessary, what could we do better? And we started playing with what's in our current V3 line, the CS and the C, that 9mm dedicated magazine. In that same time frame, we started looking at where does the round sit in the magazine when it's loaded in the gun, and how can we make the feeding more reliably aside from having a 9mm dedicated magazine, get that round up closer to the chamber, move it farther forward so that the round has less play. There's nowhere for the round to go except into the chamber, right? Gotcha. In a perfect world. At the same time frame, we started playing with external extractors and some other things. The problem with the internal extractor in the 1911 is you get somebody who's grown up on polymer guns. They don't know all the maintenance that old school 1911 guys were doing to keep 1911s running, and one of which is pulling that extractor out and cleaning the extractor tunnel out because it fills with carbon.
Right.
It fills with carbon, and then all that tension's out of the extractor, and it's not going to extract the round anymore, so it's going to be a constant double feed. So we had to fix that. So we did that with the external extractor. Another problem that was very common with people going from polymer to 2011s is they think you can just take it out of the box and run it bone dry and it'll be just fine. And you always hear the excuse, well, I have a Gen 2 Glock I haven't lubed in 5 years. And it's like, okay, well, one, maintain anything that you're carrying to protect yourself or others. I don't care what the platform is, like clean it, lube it, maintain it. But how do we make a 2011 less finicky when it's not lubed the way professional shooters were lubing 2011s back in the 80s and 90s, right?
What's the answer to that?
So we started playing around internal, putting lube rails inside the frame rails on the frame, things like that, the little pockets to hold lube in there and pockets for carbon to work itself out of.
Smart.
So the carbon's getting pushed into areas of the gun that aren't going to cause it to bind
critical.
Right? Throughout this R&D process, which was going on for a few years, we got to a point where one of the prototypes from the CS, I took out of a bag from the factory, and we put like 3,450 rounds through it in a day.
No problem.
It was lubed, lightly lubed, but we weren't adding lube for that entire fire cycle. And that was done in about 5 hours, give or take.
Wow.
Like heavy firing cycle. And it continued to run. And we're like, okay, we're finally on to something. We're getting this now where it's feeding reliably, it's extracting reliably, and it's running with the bare minimum amount of lube and no cleaning. So that was kind of our benchmark for where we wanted to get initially. And now everything we're doing is how do we make it better beyond that?
Gotcha.
How do we continue to make that gun more and more reliable and durable while not losing any of the shootability that the 2011 is known for?
Right. I mean, so are there 4 models or 5 models now?
Technically, there's 6 right now. We just launched that new C this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the biggest thing that happened in this last year, just in terms of like improvement?
Really the development of that C. Everything we learned out of the last year's CS,
put it into that.
we rolled into the C, and then it's weird. You would think making a gun that's a 4-inch gun versus a 3.5 would be easier, but you learn so much when you actually build an engineering team to do things.
Got it.
So a lot of what STI did in the past, it was all gunsmiths. So like, you're a gunsmith, I'm a gunsmith, you're building your gun there, I'm building mine here.
They're not the same.
We could have very differing opinions on what we want. So we built out an entire engineering team, and we hired an extremely intelligent engineer named Paul that I actually tried to get like 3 years ago. It took me a couple of years to get him to come on board. Some other guys, one came from Honda. We're pulling people from all over, not just the gun industry, and we're letting them look at the problems and use all of modern technology, computer programming, CAD, SolidWorks, all this stuff to figure out the best way to solve a problem.
Yeah, with a totally different perspective, and that is we know nothing about guns. We know engineering. Yeah. We know physics. We know metallurgy. We know all these things.
Yeah, we're like, here's the problem we're having. You tell me from your perspective what you think will correct it and why.
Yeah. How's that going?
It's going awesome.
Is it?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, can it be frustrating?
It is, but that's also like, those are the kind of problems I like to have because you're solving a complex puzzle.
I gotcha. Yeah.
So it kind of in my role now, I went from being that entry-level sales guy to an LE sales guy to LE and consumer sales. And now I've got 2 really great teams, one that does LE stuff, one that does consumer sales. And then I've got this little engineering group that I kind of manage, and I'm in charge of all the R&D and new product development.
Awesome.
And that's where my inner nerd comes out. I'm like, okay, let's build the perfect gun. We got a blank slate. What can we do with it?
How you feeling about that?
Good.
Yeah.
Really good. The next couple of years are going to be phenomenal for Staccato.
Oh, that's great.
Just the company mentality, I think, is the best part about working there. Like, this is a trickle down that comes from above Nate, our owner, just like his vision for the company and what we're doing. And then Nate's leadership and all of our other members of the team, like, we're all on board for the long haul. Mm-hmm. So it's really cool because at the beginning of this cycle, the whole industry was telling us we're going to fail. And
it's so odd.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Well, I mean, the industry can be polarizing as politics, anyways, right? There's varied responses to things that happen in the industry. And on one end, you have people who just like to complain because they have a voice and they want to be heard. Yeah. So they'll complain about anything. You can give them free ice cream for life and they'll complain it's the wrong flavor. Yeah. Those people. You have people who had that really bad experiences with 2011s, however long ago, not necessarily Staccatos, but STIs or other manufacturers, just 1911 platforms in general. And, they've got these held over personal experiences that don't want them to allow them to believe what we're doing now.
Right.
And I get that. Some people got to see it, hold it, do it to believe it.
Yep.
And then they're still a little skeptical for a while. And then you have some people who I think the industry doesn't like to be innovative a lot of times. It likes to maintain a status quo because it's easy. I mean, we're in America. Who can't sell a gun in America? So there's really no drive to be innovative. I think that was one of my most shocking moments of working in the industry. It was like, everybody's just cool with how things are. Oh, next year we'll do it tan, and the year after we'll do it OD green. And, it's like the same gun over and over. And I mean, there's been these moments in history where we've been innovative as the American gun industry. But for American gun industry, it's been 100 years, right? Like when you think about what guns has America produced that had long-lasting effects, it's like the 1911 and the Browning M2 machine gun. Like, those are still in service. Well, the 1911's not anymore. But everything, all the other industry innovation has come from foreign countries, which I always found strange, because America is like the gun country, has been since our founding, and we're the slowest to innovate anything in the industry. And I think at a deep level, that's really what we're wanting to do. Now, we're small. I'm not going to say we're going to go replace Glock. That's, not possible. But we're going to continue to push to be innovative with everything we do for as long as we're here.
So I think one of the things that people get frustrated by, too, is trying to solve problems that don't exist with a product or something like that. And what I heard you talking about were the problems were like efficiency. You talked about the lube rails, you talked about the magazines and things like that. But what hasn't happened is like this, we completely reinventing our product because we feel like we need to reinvent our product. And I think we see that out there quite a bit. Like, or something got done that really didn't even need to get done, and that's the thing they bring to SHOT Show and want to sort of hang their hat on. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And there's just, there's so much noise everywhere, right? It's like walking through the casino floor, like walk through the middle row, between all the slot machines, and it's like beeping and flashing and noise everywhere. And it's like, none of it has any substance. Every once in a while, there's a diamond in the rough out there, but it's like everyone's just wanting to have a flashpoint product for the most part, or something that's just, I got an F-150. Everybody loves F-150s. Right. I don't ever have to change the F-150. I'm going to sell all of them that I make.
We're good.
Yeah, we're good. And it's like, that's a boring way that's a boring way to live. It's a boring way to conduct business. I mean, it's a safe way to conduct business, but I think we're kind of like the counterculture company and all of that. Like, we all love the way the 2011 shot. We wanted it to be a good gun, and that's why we're here. I knew all the problems that the 2011 had kind of, within 90 days of working there, and I was, kind of shocked. As a pistol guy, I'm like, well, that would never fucking fly in the military. I wouldn't carry that. I wish I could shoot it and then just make sure there was somebody there to fix it for me like on the spot.
When a pro, like the race car analogy.
So how do we take that and make it where it's good for everyone? And that's where it started. And now we're just continuing to push that to see how far can we actually push it.
That's awesome. How far do you think you can push it?
Much farther than it is now.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be exponential change in what we're doing.
Exponential change?
Yeah, I think so.
Can you give us can you give me like
I wish I could. Not on camera. When you look at where we've come out, just as far as the C and the CS, right, with V3, we're scratching the surface of what we've already R&Ding at the factory in real time.
Okay.
But it takes time to do it right. So part of bringing in all those really smart engineers is they're extremely analytical about everything, and they want to test everything. Like, they want to make every decision off of data.
Yep,
it takes time to do that. And when you look at, like, we're putting in any new product, just any variant of it, whatever rev we're on, we're putting 50,000 rounds through each one of those guns. And it's not like we're just building one gun to test a theory. We'll build a batch of, 6 to 10, 50,000 rounds per gun. It adds up.
Yeah.
And that's a time thing, right? How do you get a team of people shooting that much through that gun?
Scale that up, yeah.
On camera and logging every little minor thing that happens throughout that.
Right.
So we can't turn fast, but we're moving. And that's what I like most about it right now.
That's fun.
Yeah. And I get the big picture because I'm the one driving a lot of where we're going. Yeah. So I know exactly what our scaled increments are between now and 2028. And I'm super excited. Like, I promise you, I'm not going anywhere between now and 2028 because I want to see it to the end. I want to see it to that level. And, we'll have a whole new list of things beyond 2028 by then too.
Sure.
But just knowing today what I know, where we're going in that time frame, there's no place else I want to be in this industry. So it's exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah.
I think other people are excited too, man. I mean, I think all the things you described is what people probably get about the company and the product.
Yeah.
That it is You know it when you see it, even out there just on the floor. There's so many products. There's so many things. You put it in your hand. You put the Staccato in your hand and you just kind of know, like, oh, this is different. And there's other great handgun companies out there that make great 2011s. But like I said, I think when we started, I went by that booth the other day. I couldn't get in there. Yeah. Like, everybody wants to see what you guys are doing and talk about it. They don't want to just go over there. So, other big manufacturers here, they want to go over and kind of handle and play around or whatever. But not everybody over there is talking, and they're there for a very long time. You were mentioning you couldn't even get into your booth.
Couldn't get into my own booth for a meeting.
Yeah, that's exciting.
That's great. And I think that's really, I think the product is a very small aspect of that. I honestly believe it's our customer service and how much we bring our customers in. We're giving factory tours every day.
Really?
People can just show up out of the blue and we take them on tours. We try and get them to schedule it. Right. But it's not like we're turning people away either. Our customer service on the law enforcement side is really what got us to where we are in the LE world. You read all the fluff on social media.
Sure.
I stopped reading comments a long time ago, and people are like, "Oh, they're paying these departments to take these guns," yada yada yada. And I'm like, if you guys only knew, they're only popular with law enforcement because they spend all their money on marketing. I'm like, first 3 years I was selling to law enforcement officers, nobody knew it. It was word of mouth from departments to departments because of the customer service we were giving them. And I think that's what truly sets us apart. It's not here's your product, give me your money. All right, cool. I'll see you next year at SHOT kind of thing. Like, we're there the whole time. For a long time, if I got a call that an officer was having a problem, I'd be driving to LA the next morning. I'd be down there. I'd be like, all right, what are you seeing, right? And then I'd fly to the factory in real time and I'd be like, here's what they're seeing, come out. We'd fly gunsmiths with me back out there and, we're figuring it out. We're taking care of everything. We're not perfect. We think we have something figured out and maybe there's an issue that rears its head, but we're always on top of it.
Right.
And that seems to be a recurring theme. You can talk to any of our LE customers for the most part. They're all going to tell you the same thing. We're attempting to be the most responsive company in the industry when it comes to our customers.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is anybody that's been around this business long enough knows it's only the small, very small companies that actually, that's not necessarily true. There's some big ones.
Sure.
But it's the small business that ends up taking that to heart so that they keep their customers that they work so hard to get. Yeah. It's expensive to get a lead and convert that lead into a customer. And they usually appreciate it a little bit more. And you're talking about a product it's a precision product. Yeah. Right. And there's things that are going to happen if you go out and use it sometimes, particularly as you guys are trying to innovate. You can't continue to do that if you don't back it up with the customer service.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it goes away real fast.
And we want customers for life, not customers for one product line lifespan.
You're when you're selling them their first gun, or when they buy their first gun, you're really selling them their 10th gun.
Yeah. Exactly. I want you here until we both retire. Mm-hmm. And then I still want to hang out and shoot with you and then talk about whatever Staccato's doing and when I'm an old man, right? That's the kind of mentality that we all have from the top down that starts with our owner all the way down to everyone on our team right now.
Yeah, those are solid lessons for the people out there. There are other companies out there that take that attitude. Some of them are growing maybe a little faster and they're having a little bit more of a tough time with it. But, you have to have that talent and that care and that urgency to want to fix things or just want to help people, I think is really more the thing, and do the right thing for sake of doing the right thing, period.
Absolutely.
End of story, without expectation. Because if you don't do that, pretty soon you can expect you're not going to look very good, and people in this industry talk.
Yeah.
So.
And you got to own it. Like, you can't hide your mistakes either. Like, own it. Like, a lot of people try and brush things under the rug and be like, oh, that wasn't really a problem. That's being overhyped. And it's like, we have a problem, we admit it, and then we go find a fix to it, and we fix it, and we take care of it. And we don't have to advertise that we do that.
We move on.
Our customers do. Our customers are like, yeah, I had this gun, it was a total lemon. But dude, Staccato took care of it. They took care of it like instantly. And, the number of customer service responses we get from people when things like that have happened.
Yeah.
Just hearing and reading what real people, real customers actually have the product are writing and emailing to us is great.
It reinforces you're doing the right thing.
That we're doing it, and we're doing it the way we want to do it, and it's the way that's making everyone happy where they want to be part of it.
I love that. Yeah. How many employees do you guys have?
I think we're around 250 to 280 now. We've grown dramatically in the last 6 years.
I had no idea.
I think when I started, we had like 70 to 80 in 2018.
I thought you were like, maybe half of what you just said.
Yeah, we just moved into our new facility in Texas this year. So we moved, the old facility, I think, was like 40,000 square feet between two buildings that were about 190,000 years old. It was like walking into, you expect to see like a blacksmith back there with a hammer. They were so run down. We built a new like 100,000 square foot facility on 600 acres in Texas. And we have the ranch that we're building out now, the Staccato Ranch, which is, a training facility, competition facility. They got sporting clays there. They've got pistol bays, rifle bays, all kinds of stuff going on there.
That's fun.
Indoor range, the whole bit. And we're just doing it. We want to be able to bring our family in and hang out with us and see what we're all about, like in real time. Like come to the factory, come to the ranch, take a tour of the factory, hang out with the employees, that kind of thing. But as we grow, we're not losing that.
It's a novel idea, man.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the industry at large, and just all the big gun manufacturers that maybe they do a decent job on customer service with regard to, replacing something or fixing something, but nobody knows the people.
Yeah.
And it's generally a couple of bean counters at the top, that, with a CEO or whatever, that nobody ever sees, nobody ever hears from. And what I get about you guys, you just mentioned, you guys are out there in the field.
Yeah.
Like you're there with your customers. And going back to the law enforcement piece, I was impressed when I heard that you guys were breaking into law enforcement because for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, the standard big companies generally can price their stuff. They can send it all the way to the bottom and practically give them away as people have suggested you might be doing, right? But the other part is they're not going with a small company because of the liability issues generally that can exist there.
Sure.
So the fact that you guys are breaking into law enforcement the way you guys have broken into law enforcement, that to me says something about the quality, but also the trust, right? And the work that you're doing to build those relationships, because I know how that works in the bureaucracy, right?
Yeah.
It's got to go through so many people, all the red tape for somebody to sign off on it. Hey, and you guys are a higher ticket item.
Yeah.
So how many departments are you directly selling to now?
Almost 1,500.
What?
And we have almost, I think the number's right around 80 of major SWAT teams in the country running the gun exclusively.
I had no idea.
Yeah. We do it all on the down low. That's the thing. Like I love it when I read the comments. It's like, oh, they're just throwing marketing money at it. It's like, I didn't have a marketing budget until 2022. We grew Staccato, LE from, one department on 1911s in 2018 to 1,500 apartments today.
Who was it in 2018?
It was Lakeland SWAT in Florida. Had some legacy 1911s, like single stack 45 1911s that STI had bought a long time ago. They just replaced them, I think, last year with 2011s.
Wow.
So the way I got started with the LE stuff, it was like, it's very funny. At 2018 in SHOT Show at my interview, a good buddy of mine from the Marine Corps brought the guys from Riverside County SWAT over to meet me. And I hadn't officially started yet. I had no idea we didn't do anything for law enforcement, right? So they were like, "Oh, do you guys sell guns to law enforcement?"
How do we get these?
I was like, "Absolutely, we do. Shoot me an email a couple weeks after SHOT. I'll be fully onboarded and I'll get back to you." Right? No idea. The number was 1, and it was 1 from 10 years ago. So go back and I start, and I'm sitting at my computer in the sales bullpen, which was like 8 desks, 8 people, no cubicle walls, no noise canceling headphones. Everybody's on the phone nonstop. It was nerve wracking, and I would stay and work through lunch because it was silent when everyone was at lunch.
Like boiler room.
Yeah. And I had 2 people call me in the span of like a week and a half, and one was the U.S. Marshal Special Operations Group, and the other one was Long Beach SWAT.
After the show.
And
because they got their hands on the guns. February into March kind of time frame. I'm getting these calls, and at this point, I've learned we don't
do anything.
You're telling
law
people
enforcement. No. Yeah. And so kind of in this period of time I'm talking to them, I start digging through old sales kits and finding guns that they have discontinued forever ago. And I'm like, I'm going to go do these visits. I'm going to go meet these guys face to face and see what
find
they
out
want.
what their needs are.
Yeah. So contact the guys from Riverside County because I was going out to Long Beach to sit on their range with them. And I get out there and I've got the guns and I'm kind of just listening to their feedback while they shoot. They're not talking to me, they're talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like taking notes. I'm like, okay, they don't like that. They like this. They don't like that. They need this. We don't have that. We need to figure this out, etc. Leave there. And I fly back to Texas. And then I hop in a car and I drive to Louisiana to the U.S. Marshals SOG headquarters and do the same thing with them. And I put together this list of all these feature sets from all these guns that have either in manufacturing or they've been discontinued because they never sold, et cetera. And I kind of pinned out what the gun was we needed to build. And I went and pitched it to Nate, the CEO. And I was like, we need to build this gun. I can get probably all 3 of these SWAT teams to buy off on this. And he's sitting in the conference room and, he's in the same time frame. He's been on the job for about 90, 120 days. Like the financials are a mess. Their quality controls all over the fucking place. Mm-hmm. And he's just kind of thinking about it. And when you meet Nate, it'll make more sense. He gets these silences when he's thinking.
The hamster wheel's going.
But he should be a professional poker player. You have no idea what his answer is going to be. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I got a 50-50 chance. Like, is he going to say yeah or no?
Yeah.
And then he kind of looked at me and he was like, if I build this gun, you have to sell it. And I was like, I totally bullshitted. And I was like, oh, I'll sell thousands of them. I expected to maybe sell like 150 between the 3, but I at least knew that would drive the company to take what they were doing serious at every level. It's like, hey, now we're selling to law enforcement, which we all have strong convictions about serving. Nate's also a former enlisted Marine as well. We have a lot of veterans on the staff. We have a lot of former law enforcement on the staff. Like, we take those who serve seriously. So this checks boxes for a lot of things. It's like on the product development side, we know we'll be making good stuff and we'll be getting feedback from professional end users. We'll be servicing the people that are protecting us every day. And ultimately, it will reinforce how serious handguns really are for the people making them. Be like, this isn't going into some bag at a match that some guy's going to clean between every stage. Like, this is going in a holster for a guy who's going out to protect you. Your job matters too.
We need to get him home.
Yeah. So he looked at me and I gave him that answer and he said, okay. And I was like, holy shit, I can't believe he's going to let me build this. So we get it spooled up. They make some R&D ones so I can take like the first iteration of this gun back out to Long Beach, Riverside, and to the U.S. Marshals SOG. Over the next several months, they're giving me feedback on what they like, don't like. And it evolved into the Staccato P that we launched at SHOT Show in 2019.
Got it.
And I think the single biggest factor for us being successful there was I went out there and listened to what they wanted. I didn't take something an engineer built in an office and pushed it on them with some kind of, used car lot sales guy sales pitch. I didn't actually have a sales pitch. Nate at one point started teasing me about it because he was like, do you just like stare at people until they go shoot the gun or what? Because you don't talk to anyone. And I was like, no, I let them shoot it and then I answer their questions.
Yeah.
But I think that was the start of where we really wanted the customer service to go. It was, let's build a gun that they're asking for instead of building something we think we need to. Mm-hmm. And then let's support them through that whole process. And then we'll support them for the whole time they have it afterwards.
I guess that's very novel.
Yeah. And I've been told by dozens of departments throughout the last several years, face to face, chiefs of police, everything, that they've never met another company that does it that way.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, not on handguns.
Yeah.
There might be a rifle company or two out there. I don't know, but I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
With regard to the handgun side of things. That is what's separating you guys. That is why so many people are at your booth. They're all happy. They're all asking questions. There's a curiosity there, but it's almost like they're almost enamored by it. And that might be, I don't think that's an exaggeration. It's like a club when I go over there. It's like a club within the club. Like everybody seems to know Staccato. They know what it is. Everybody wants one.
Yeah.
Right? So they always take, like, they're taking the time to go over there and just kind of handle it, and God, these are cool, and whatever else, versus people exploring it. You're meeting their expectation before they're kind of even there, I guess is my point. However high they've put it or whatever their expectation is, whether it's a high expectation or mid-range or whatever, you guys seem to be meeting and exceeding it. I don't have one. I need to get one.
I know a guy. Yeah. I'm sure we can get you taken care of.
I'm behind enemy lines in California, so we got some work to do.
You can always drive to Nevada and go shoot with me anytime.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yeah, there's so you've already talked about sort of future of the company and where you see the trajectory going exponentially, with regard to the the growth or innovation specifically. Sure. What does that mean for you? Does that just mean you just keep traveling around and seeing folks and making sure they're taken care of, or what does that mean? I mean, pretty soon is it total global domination for you, or
no? For us, it's a very organic, like homegrown effort, right? Yeah. So I'll still travel a lot. I'll still go out. I'll still go visit my accounts and new accounts even. Yeah. I spend a lot of time going back and forth to the factory, meeting with the engineers because of the heavy workload we have on the R&D side right now, and wanting to make sure that we see all those projects to the end. But I still get out. I still go to LE stuff with some of my LE guys occasionally. I go to conferences. I get out and visit dealers as well. I'm lucky I have a very solid crew. My VP of dealer sales, consumer sales is awesome. My VP of LE sales is awesome. Everyone who works on both those teams is great. So I was able to build the LE thing up into something where it's almost self-sustaining now. Like I'm really there just for mentorship and sign off on things from them. Great. Which was hard. It's like raising a child and then giving them away. But it's such a solid crew. And that really allows me time to focus on the R&D stuff.
Right, you're not trying to do too many things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're walking into these dealers or whatever, you're not being met with fire.
Yeah, exactly. They're actually excited you're there 90% of the time.
That's a good place to be. Yeah, I've been on the other side of that.
Sure.
Where that's not fun. That doesn't make work very fun. Jeez, Buck, that was, you gave me so much information. I mean, I had no idea about your background, but I think it makes good sense, how it's evolved for you into what you're doing now and how you're handling things and how you're thinking. You're a deeper thinker. I appreciate that. Yeah. It's not just about the product. It's about the connection that people have with the product. And for me, it's more about the relationships that you're building with departments and the humans that your customer, right? But also the people that are there at the company. And I have heard very good things internally from folks with regard to, how they feel about working there. People want to work for Staccato. Yeah. Right? They want to come to work every day. They want to punch in and punch out, right? Yeah. They want to do all that stuff. And again, like I said, with regard to the product, it speaks for itself. Everybody wants one. So, look, man, I appreciate you coming down and spending time with me today. I know you're super busy. You guys were doing the range stuff the first couple of days, or Sunday and Monday. Yeah. It's hard, you're just going bell to bell. Yeah. I look forward to my 7-hour quiet drive home at the end of shot. I just need the decompression time. Yeah. Some fresh air, maybe some sun, some fresh air. And so I've been trying to get outside for 20 minutes a day, which sounds wild. Just to get some sunlight and some fresh air outside the casino and whatever. So I can appreciate that. I'm going to go home and just veg out for a couple of days. Yeah, the week after shots are always interesting. Everyone's either sick or they're like, hit me up next week about that. I don't have the mental bandwidth right now. That's exactly it. I intend on walking in the door and going face down on my bed when I get there. And and probably being very sick by middle of next week. It's kind of what happens. You can kind of hear it in my voice already. My body is. We have Joe to thank for that. That's all cigar smoke. Yeah, that place was wild. With as much smoke was in that cigar bar, so that wasn't good. I think I probably nearly killed CC with a secondhand smoke last night too. So anyway, man, like I said, I appreciate your time. No, this has been great. Yeah, good. I'm glad. Did you have fun? I did. All right, good. This is a great break from being in the booth. That's what I was just going to say. Yeah. Hopefully, that's how people feel about it when they leave here. So, listen, where do people go to find out more about Staccato? Maybe more about you. I know we talked about this last night. You've not made this about you. You've made this about the product and the company and the relationships. And I know you run sort of low vis, again, that's it's part of the reason I didn't have any intel on you outside of what my friends told me. That's good. That means I was actually successful for 6 whole years in this industry. Yeah, right. So. Yeah. But where do you want people to go to find out more about your product? What do they do? Staccato2011.com. This is the website. We just launched a new webpage. It's much easier to navigate.
The Staccato Ranch is built around our new factory. You guys can come visit that anytime. You can reach out to our customer service team via the website and schedule times to come out and do tours. We've got trainers rotating in and out of there that are coming in and doing classes, various competitions, etc. And it's all on the website for the Staccato Ranch as well.
Cool. How do they, I mean, like right now when you come out of a SHOT Show like this, are you prepared for all the new orders and stuff? No. It's never the case,
You can never fully prepare for SHOT Show or the aftermath.
Yeah.
So
that's outstanding. Well, I mean, that's what makes it fun, I guess.
Yeah. Keeps you on your toes.
Well, thanks again, man, for your time. I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. Thank you.
You're welcome.